evening, everyone, and welcome to the Richard Listens Show. I am happy to be back in here. It has been a rocky month, but the band marches on. What can we say? NBA free agency, the Lakers, the Clippers. It's going to be an exciting time here in Los Angeles. My own personal journey has taken me this month from working with Windward Basketball High School and their coach Colin Pfaff, who will be on in 2 weeks here, right here on the Richard Listens Show on All Access Broadcasting. And then officially today it's announced that the Richard Listens squad will be working with MMA Fighter Management. So thanks to former guest Dr. Andrew Sarowitz, we combine our work with somatic and performance psychology and hopefully helping some of these modern day gladiators in the work they're doing in a sport that's growing more and more popularity and interest. And yet at the same time, we know for all elite performers, there needs to be a little retooling from time to time and focusing on how to process all that combat that they put themselves through. So I'm very excited and thankful for those opportunities. Today, we'll be getting into lighter subjects, but also a little bit heavier subject. Many of you know that I am somatic experience trained, which has to do a lot of the times working with trauma and the way body stores emotions, and also currently working on something, a training called EMDR, which is often used for trauma treatment and is usually known as one in the industry of psychology as one of the go-to protocols for therapy on PTSD. So today's guest will be covering a little bit about life, love, cancer, the C word, how to survive after losing a loved one. I'm getting a little choked up. It's been a rough month for that, but it's very appropriate and hopefully can offer some tools in how she's maintained her strength, how she helps others, and the lessons of love and care and resilience that you learn from battle with illness and of all kinds. So without further ado, my guest tonight is Mrs. Lauren Kelley. She is a podcaster and author, so we're gonna, take notes on each other later on and help each other professionally. But for tonight, we're grateful that she would share her charity work and her personal journey with us. Without further ado, please welcome Miss Lauren Kelley.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here. And you mentioned EMDR. It's actually something that I'm going to be starting next Friday. So any tips you can give me on how to be the most open with that, I definitely would appreciate it.
For yourself?
Yes, for myself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, with PTSD. So, which we will go into, I'm sure, during this segment because it's a big part of my life.
Wow, and how brave of you to acknowledge that you're going through things like that. But I was, it's interesting for years of being in the licensing exam, hearing about EMDR, and I'm like, and everyone is always like, what? Even
what
clients
that?
I introduced to, like, what is this acronym that you're repeating? And, I hear that they wave their finger in front of your eyes, and I was kind of like, that sounds like
hypnosis.
Exactly. That's exactly the thought.
Follow my finger.
And I think a lot has to do with always the trainer and the group that you train with.
Yeah.
But the idea being, I think, behind a lot of pain, that there's a lot of stories that we hold on to.
Yes.
And particularly for people who want to help others, we have to look at sometimes, well, how are we helping ourselves?
Yes.
And the things we say or the stories we tell ourselves often make it hard.
Yeah, it can either harm you or help you.
Right. We could be in a way harming ourselves, and it's so hard and deep when it comes to trauma work because that early life experience or that really significant sudden life experience has it was unavoidable, and it was it's so painful that all we want to do is like find a way to control it.
Yes.
So I mean, but the EMDR training has taught a few little tips and tools that I like to do with my clients, which involve, I think, and we do this when we work with children too, about like creating a safe place for the work.
Yeah.
So at the same point, and you haven't shared your story yet, but for me, I wouldn't want, people ask as a clinician, well, do you tell your clients that you've gone through grief.
Yeah.
Or a similar life experience to theirs, and there's
Yeah.
all these like ethics and rules around keeping things close to yourself and not taking care of. On the other hand, there's other beliefs that being really present and in the moment, and it can amplify a connection.
Yeah.
So
that's what I find works for me. And my therapist that I see on a weekly basis, she's very open about her life experiences. And I think, like Brene Brown, the researcher and public speaker, she talks about how the most powerful words in the English language when you're going through struggle is "me too." And I think that that is so appropriate for anybody going through trauma. When somebody can sit beside you and say, I know what you're going through, and really mean it, it opens up the door to so much healing, to so much conversation that you could never have before. So I'm thankful that people like you are willing to talk about it, because not everybody is willing to be so vulnerable. So, and I'm hoping that with the EMDR, it can help me process the memories that are being stored that I can't let go of, or that I can't process on my own. So, again, you don't really know my story yet, so I guess we should kind of talk about that.
We can go there, but I think, the idea being that, like, you get to tell your story, and you get to look at how you feel when you tell the story, and you get to, I think the fact that you get to become really aware of that, and certain tools about, like, when I'm telling my story, do I notice myself, like, if I'm tense while telling my story?
Yeah, hands are sweaty, or
so maybe I want to just be present with that for a moment, rather than trying to feel like I have to get away from it.
Yes.
So I can be both inspiring and motivating others and caring, and I can also be kind to the fact that my shoulders are really tense. And maybe it's an anniversary,
or you may shed a tear, and that's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
People will tell you I'm not afraid to cry in front of anybody now, so I wouldn't be surprised if it happened here.
Okay, well, we'll do it together.
Yeah.
see what it does for ratings.
Yeah.
But it is about being present, and being present, which is a lot of I'm listening to the Lewis Howes podcast and other they're talking about the mask of masculinity, and Brene Brown talks a lot about being vulnerable.
Yes.
And what happens in that space.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole lot of that going on, and a whole a lot of permission asking, and I've had some pretty humbling conversations with, like, tech support at the university that I speak, just like like they're repeating things 3 times, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, this is just
I can't get there right now.
And you'd be surprised that there's people in different domains who have some innate therapy skills too. So without further ado, we can share offline about some tips and techniques that I use. But there's one in particular which I really like, which a trainer used in my training of EMDR, which is called the container, which is like and it's very subjective to what your container would look like. And I think the rules for the container are only that it's safe, and that you can both put things in and take things out.
You can control it. Oh, that sounds amazing.
So there's it's a pretty fun exercise to like allow yourself to have this metaphorical space that you can put what those feelings are, what the story is, and you can anytime you can access it. And it's there.
Well, then I look forward to the work. I'm excited.
I think
there's not a lot in my life that I feel like I can control, so I think having like that space, like you're saying, that I can say, this is what I want in it, this is what I don't want in it, I think is a really powerful thing. So I hope that's something I can get to for sure.
Yeah. So let's start with that. So the feeling of not having control.
Yeah. Yes.
When did that begin, or can you?
Yeah. So it kind of shifted in 2013. I was a young mom. I got married when I was 18 years old. I met my husband, and within a few months we knew that we were going to be together, and so did my family and his family. And not too long after we got married, we started our family. And at that time, I threw myself wholeheartedly into motherhood, and I don't regret anything, but I do wish I had known that it was okay to make space for myself, because I think over the years of having children, we have 5 altogether, Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a circus, but really joyful. So,
Did you come from a big family?
I'm one of 3. My husband's one of 5. So we always knew we kind of wanted a big family. 4 was kind of our limit, and number 5 was a big surprise. But she's been the best surprise, so I don't mind it. But yeah, so I just kind of made myself small and kind of lost who I was for quite some time. And just as I was kind of starting the work in reevaluating myself and just rediscovering the things I'm passionate about, the things I love to do, the things that make me feel like me, we got hit with a really difficult and unexpected thing. My daughter Hazel, who was 2 years old at the time, she was number 3 in line. At that time in 2013, we only had 4 children. She was diagnosed with stage 3 neuroblastoma, which is a type of childhood cancer that originates in your sympathetic nervous system. So like your adrenal glands that are responsible for your fight or flight symptoms. And so her tumor was found on her right adrenal gland, and it was the size of like a Nerf football in a little 2-year-old's body. And as most parents whose children have cancer can attest to, you kind of have to hit the ground running. You don't have time really to process what's happened, because they have to treat aggressively and they have to treat quickly, because childhood cancer is, well, they say it's rare. I've learned that it's not as rare as we all think, but it's also very aggressive. And neuroblastoma especially, it's the number 1 tumor in young children, and it's got a 50 to 60% cure rate. But that goes down the higher your staging is. So she was stage 3. We caught it right before it spread, but most cases are stage 4 because it doesn't really show symptoms until it's spread throughout the body.
What's she showing? Signs of pain? Or?
Yeah, so she's always was a talker. Like even at 2 years old, she was speaking in full sentences and communicating with me in ways that I never experienced with my other children. So I was very thankful for that, because she started saying she had owies in her belly. And I thought, okay, maybe she's got the flu or she's constipated, like it could be anything. And then she got really lethargic, and then she refused to eat, which was very unlike her, because she was like a Buddha baby. She loved to eat. She was chunky. And I think that's why we didn't notice the tumor, because she already had a belly to begin with. And so it was just filling the abdominal cavity, but it wasn't pushing anything out. It was just crunching all of the organs inside of her body. And so I kept calling the doctors, and they said, well, keep an eye on it. Does she have a fever? I don't know. If it's the flu, like if she spikes a fever, call us back. But my mommy instincts were saying, no, there is something wrong with my child. She needs to be seen now. And so I was seen the next day with her. That was a Friday. We found the tumor that evening, and by Sunday, we had a full diagnosis, and by Monday we were starting chemo. Wow. So I was very thankful I trusted my instincts as her mother, but again, it was a whirlwind, and you have no time for second opinions. You have no time to decide whether or not you want to do chemo, if you want to try more natural therapies. You just want to save your child's life, and you're trusting these strangers to do their job, and it was very, very overwhelming. And she was very sick for a while, but then as the tumor was shrinking through chemo, like her spirit was coming back, and she just like lived life in the midst of cancer treatment with such enthusiasm. Every person at the hospital just fell in love with her, because you couldn't ignore her. She wouldn't let you, like you walk in and she would engage with you and talk with you and make jokes, and she owned her treatment. She would talk about when it's time for her blood pressure and temperature, and if they did it wrong, she would correct them. And like she just had this spunky will of steel and like this way about her that I think really served her in her treatment. So, as horrific as the diagnosis was, I was beyond surprised how positive that she looked at it and how positively she kind of embraced the new normal, and but it was hard, having four kids at the time.
How did they process it, or in different ways?
Yeah, I mean, my oldest at the time was only 6, so and the youngest was only 4 months old. I was still nursing him at the time, so he didn't really know anything. This just had to be his new normal. And so he just kind of adjusted. But the other two, they missed us a lot. We didn't refer to it as cancer right away because we didn't want them to go to school and someone say, oh, my grandpa died from cancer, and really scare them. So we initially just called it what it was neuroblastoma. And it was a, sickness that was making her feel so unwell and that we had to be in the hospital and give her medicine. But as they grew older and understood it more, the cancer word was a big part of it. And she was in 18 months of treatment. So it wasn't something we could just avoid. And she was losing her hair. And we were always of the opinion that we needed to be transparent with the kids to the point of what they could understand. But we didn't want to tell them about how life-threatening it was unless it was going to get there. And we were lucky enough that after, she had 6 rounds of intensive inpatient chemotherapy, which were 3 to 5 days long of different types of medicines. She had an 8-hour tumor resection surgery. She had a stem cell transplant, which is like a bone marrow transplant, but you receive your own stem cells back. But that caused such complications that she ended up in a coma in the ICU for about 4 weeks. And thankfully she pulled through, but she had to relearn how to walk, talk, swallow. It was a very long inpatient rehab while still continuing cancer treatment. She went to radiation in a wheelchair without knowing how to walk and talk because we had to keep treating her cancer. And then over the course of a few months, she was coming back and all the drugs were filtering out through her liver and her kidneys that weren't working very well, but were finally working again. And she made a full recovery. And by the time she wrapped up her immunotherapy treatment, which was about 5 months long, she was cancer-free for 2.5 years. And she grew up and just took every moment and embraced it and lived life. And she found the beauty in the world. And it was so incredible to watch. And you could see how thankful she was just for life, after almost losing it so many times. And
what was that like for you, seeing her pull through all that?
Most cancer families, especially that have children, they'll create some sort of blog or some sort of Facebook page to keep people updated, and they usually call it something. And we called it Hope for Hazel. And we kind of hung on to this Bible verse that says, hope is the anchor of the soul. That's why I have this anchor tattoo. And we printed those out on shirts and, bracelets. And I think that really, without even realizing the word we chose, it became the anthem of our journey. Every step we took, there was still hope. And every challenge we faced, she made it easier to hope because she found the brighter side of things. And honestly, I was in awe because as a mom, I have so many things running through my mind that I couldn't sit in that hope a lot because I was afraid for her life. But she did a remarkable job in bringing me out of that and seeing all the other kids too on the floor. There's nothing like seeing these kids getting chemo, running down the halls, playing hide and seek while attached to chemotherapy. There's nothing like that gives you perspective.
Right, they're just in play at that moment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was so cute because she would go hide behind a corner and she'd forget she's connected to a pole. And she's like, nobody can see me, but her pole's like a dead giveaway. But she just, she was that way. She could literally get sick. She'd throw up and then she'd be like, I feel better, and go off and play Play-Doh in the playroom at the hospital. She had this way about her that I feel like we learned so much from her. And it was so hard, to watch her go through it and to feel like we can't do anything to take the pain away. And I wish we could have done more, but she just had this way about her. And I don't know where she got it from or if she was always meant to have it, but she had this way that she could push through the really tough stuff and still find the joy. And that's what I'm trying to do every single day since,
So what do you tell other parents or families that are struggling to find the joy or
that's
finding tough times, finding the pause button amidst trying to keep everyone alive?
I honestly, and I don't always take my own advice because it's not easy, taking one moment at a time. And And even if it's really, really difficult, there are still things that can bring a smile to your face or hope to your heart, especially if you look to your children. But that it's okay on the days where you don't feel hope, and that it's okay on the days where all you feel is the pain and the fear, that it's okay to feel those things, and it's okay to move through those things. What's not okay is staying stuck there. It's not always easy for me. I mean, like I was telling you, she was cancer-free for 2.5 years. And then just 2 days before she started kindergarten in 2016, the cancer came back. And relapsed neuroblastoma currently has no known cure. So when that happened, there was very little hope that I could cling to, because I thought, we're going to lose her. Like, there is no other option. But again, she did this thing where she wasn't done fighting, and she wanted to help other people. Like, we'd go to the hospital and she would make cards for the other kids in the unit. And then she put a sign on her door that said, "Hazel says this, keep fighting, kids." You know, because she knew the value in that, which at that time she was 5 and 6 years old. It was remarkable to me. And we started throughout her cancer journey, I call it this, we became accidental advocates. We never really set out to be childhood.
So powerful,
yeah,
right?
Right? We didn't set out to be childhood cancer advocates. My whole life, though, I've always loved helping people. I just never knew how it was going to play out in my adulthood. And then we had kids when I was so young that I never really made that space and navigated that. But
and yet
we
then you
kind
wind
of
up with
became
Hazel
that.
showing you.
Yeah, and
inspire people, leave messages.
Exactly, and kind of what culminated in that is she put a sign in her window that said, "Send pizza, room 4112," and many people watching may remember it. It went viral. It was on Reddit. It was the #1 story. People from all over the world were calling and sending pizzas. We got 250 pizzas sent to the hospital, and she became known.
Did you know that she had posted that?
Well, I knew. Yeah, I was kind of helping her because at that time she was only 3, and we did it with medical tape. She was just trying to wave to people down in the Vaughn's parking lot next door, and so we thought, what would be a cute way to get people's attention? Maybe they'll send a pizza. We never anticipated it being posted online, and because of that, we ended up getting 150,000 Facebook followers to pray for her, to support our family, and we felt it. Like, there's nothing like having a community of people around you that are encouraging you and lifting you up. And Hazel was so thankful for that, and she loved telling her story, that we kind of became these advocates in the midst of all of that. And she wanted to help the other kids. And so we started fundraising. We started doing blood drives. We started, talking with other people about childhood cancer and going on interviews. And, we felt like it was a privilege in a way, because we could help so many people and have the conversation start in corners of the world that it's never begun. And I think having her and that spirit while she relapsed helped us pull through, because we were in the middle of planning our very first fundraising gala that benefits the St. Baldrick's Foundation. It's the leading private funder of childhood cancer research in the world. They're based out here in Monrovia. And we were doing a gala fundraiser, and it was only 2 weeks before our inaugural event that she relapsed. And she was starting a new drug that was just approved by the FDA through a clinical trial that was funded by St. Baldrick's. So that gala became like the most important thing to us, because it's because of their work that she's getting treatment for relapsed neuroblastoma. We have to keep supporting them. And she was just so on fire about it. And because of those kinds of new treatments, she was able to beat it for a second time. And again, it just kind of infused hope for us. And that even in those really dark days, like, we could still find that joy and find, the giggles. She was really good at laughing about everything.
And you were like discovering more and more, as challenging as it gets, like, that's the worst fear, right? That
Yes.
it's going to come back.
Yes.
More connection, more inspiration,
Yes.
more motivation.
Exactly. Yeah. And I ended up, in the midst of all of that, I traveled 3 different times now to Washington, D.C. to speak with our representatives about childhood cancer funding and research and awareness. And we spearheaded the campaign to get the STAR Act passed, which was passed last year by Congress because of the efforts of hundreds of advocates that came with me. And it stands for survivorship, treatment, access, and research. And the goal is to support all 4 of those things and to help children navigate through all of that and to provide the funding, because that's what's lacking right now.
All for childhood cancer.
All for childhood cancer. And it was passed. And it's one of those things where, again, it's kind of weaved this really beautiful accidental advocacy together where we've connected with people from all around the world and have been able to help people and talk with people and be vulnerable and say, hey, you know what? Like, crappy stuff happens in life and we know it. It just kept hitting us, but there's still hope somehow. And Hazel was the best at showing that. But 3 months after she beat it for the second time, it came back again, and we just couldn't get on top of it. Sorry, I knew this might happen.
Yeah.
And we tried and tried, and even at the end, March of last year, we were ready to switch to a new treatment that we were hopeful about. Even her doctors, we were still fighting. We weren't quite at that point yet where we said, there's nothing more we can do. But we ended up going to the hospital because it sounded like she had a respiratory infection. And they took an x-ray. They said she had pneumonia. And we said, okay, well, let's treat the pneumonia. And she seemed to be getting better, but the pain wasn't going away. So they did a CAT scan, and they saw that it wasn't pneumonia. It was, in fact, a disease that had spread and consumed her entire lungs. And there was nothing more to be done. And that was a Wednesday in March. And by Friday, which was Good Friday last year, she was gone. And we didn't really have time to process it again because we were still hopeful. And sometimes I feel betrayed by that hope. But I think seeing how she lived her life is what kind of keeps me going now in my grief from this last year. And that's where my PTSD has kind of come into play. We had 5 years of fighting cancer. Our 5th child was born in the midst of all of that. My daughter was in and out of hospitals. Our family was torn apart. I saw her almost lose her life. I can't even tell you how many times. And then she did take her last breath in my arms. And there are days where my brain goes, this is too much to process. And I depersonalize and I live outside of my body and watch myself live my life like a movie. And because my brain's going, no, you can't reconcile these things. But on the days where I can sit and really think about it and think about her, think about the way that she lived life, those are the moments where I go, okay, there's joy somewhere, there's hope somewhere. And I'm trying really, really hard to find it.
Wow. Wow. And right, there's an incompleteness with sudden loss or any sudden change.
Yeah.
And even though it could have been a reality for
5 years. Yeah, it's like we were anticipating it, but it was still sudden.
But it sounds like, her spirit created a very different thing where you were always, right, like you said, it's sympathetic activation. It's work where you're like, oh, how can I help and how can I fix and what can we do? But it created all this energy going outward into the world about, and that can be exhausting too, right? Because it's
my gosh, yes.
I just need a minute to be.
Yes, I either am like in there with all of it, and then I'm like in complete solitude and broken, and then I have to like take a week and just recover. And then what I've learned is like that's okay,
Absolutely.
And I think watching her go through it and experiencing the things she did and being angry when she was and being happy when she was and feeling sick when she was, feeling good when she was, it was like she was embodying the very thing I'm striving for, where she just was like living in that moment. Even if it was bad, she lived it, she felt it, she moved on. I have not figured that out yet. My 7-year-old daughter figured it out. Like, she had this old soul, and I learned from her every day. And I think so many people around the world saw that in her too. And that's why so many people were impacted by her and her story. And I don't want to dishonor that by being quiet. I want to keep sharing her story, sharing the way she lived life, even if I fail at it most of the time, I started that podcast,
Yeah, so tell us, the things that she's moved you to do.
Yeah.
You started out saying like, I'm 18 years old and I'm married and who am I?
Yeah.
And now like, look, what are all the things that she's pushed you? What is Hope for Hazel?
Yeah. So our page is Hope for Hazel. So if you want to follow along with our journey post losing her, or if you want to learn more about my daughter, I would love it if you got to know her. She's Hope for Hazel on Facebook. But kind of through that, like I said, I kind of became this accidental advocate.
That's an important thing. I just want to start, that people can still get to know her. And I'm like laughing and I'm like following you and I'm like, why is she talking about pain? Why is he laughing? But it's like, the beautiful spirit and the soul.
And that people can still remember her. And get to know her for the first time.
And something as simple as, send pizzas to room 4112. It's like, you do a small action.
Yes.
That you can lift the burden of somebody else.
Yes.
And
somehow she knew that at 7 years old. I don't know how, but she's amazing. But that kind of led me, I started chronicling everything through our journey on our blog. We had a blog called Our Little Hazelnut. And because that's what we called her, and people always were like very responsive and saying, you write so eloquently and you're very transparent and I really appreciate it. You share what it's really like, but you also encourage others, and that's so unique. And I didn't really see it that way because that's just always how I've been. I've always been a very honest and like vulnerable kind of person. And I think that kind of served me well when I used to do musical theater and writing and all sorts of stuff. Like I just have things to say and I want to connect to people. But people were encouraging me to put it together in a book. So I've been writing a book called Send Pizza. And it talks about how pizza brought hope to the world. And I always knew that pizza was a really good unifier, but I didn't know that it could usher hope to thousands and thousands of people. So I've been working on that. I'm trying to get it published right now. I have one publisher who's kind of interested, but they're not sure how to market it. So if anybody knows anything, I'm more than happy to take advice. And in the midst of all of that, another cancer mom and I started talking about how a lot of people don't talk about mental health struggles, especially in the midst of trauma and grief, and how you can still find the joy and the laughter in the midst of that. So we decided to start a podcast, and it's called For Grits and Giggles, like the play on words for shits and giggles. And it's talking about the grit of life and the giggles of life. And we end every episode on what was our grit for the week and what was our giggle for the week, because both are important. And it's been an incredible blessing in my life. Not only just doing it and having a creative outlet and feeling like I'm purposeful again and feeling like I have something worth saying, it's also been really cool to see the response. And we always said from the beginning, if we just help one person, it's worth it. Or if we just help ourselves deal with the trauma we've been through, then it's worth it. And it has, and I've grown so much and learned so much. And I hope to continue to help people. And I hope the podcast can do that. I hope Hazel's story can do that. And, coming on interviews like this,
Absolutely. I mean, you're just reminding me over the last month, because, we have this process, which I got to learn about, called the Shiva process.
Yes.
And you're getting kind of educated on both what these steps you can take to ease the suffering. And it was very beautiful things
really
that I
is.
learned about the amount of people that were coming by and visiting and bringing food, and a lot of the eulogies around my father talked about stories about pastrami and his love of food. So it was so funny how they were like, not for health advocacy purposes, but for keeping his spirit alive. There was like 15 pastrami corned beef trays that came by that week.
See, it's
and
like
everybody
pizza
was
too.
talking
It's the
about
same.
It was symbolic for life and love and memories. But
that's beautiful.
but when you were sharing, I was thinking, because I'm sitting there and it's a very uncomfortable time, but my nature is just to like introduce people together.
Yes.
So I kind of created my own like weird aspects of my life networking event.
Like, oh, Uncle so-and-so, come meet cousin so-and-so. You've never seen each other.
There was a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And connecting.
Yeah, you'd like him because he likes pastrami.
Exactly. So there was internally, as in shock and
Yes.
challenged as I was also kind of laughing.
Yeah, I know. I laughed at Hazel's memorial service, which I still struggle with the guilt of that, but I did because we talked about things that brought those emotions to the surface, and it's
And she
interesting.
made you happy.
She did.
And she made you laugh.
She did. Yeah. We showed some videos of her that made us laugh too, and that felt really good. But it's funny you mentioned the Shiva, because one of our episodes, we talk about how different cultures around the world grieve and mourn. And we talked about like Victorian England times and how they had outward expressions of grief so people knew to deal with you delicately. Women would wear the veils and it could allow them the safe space to cry if they wanted, and that people could say, I know you're going through something. Now it's all so, personal and quiet. There are like tribes around the country that have like celebrations after someone's died, and they encourage you to like flirt with each other and get together, and like that's how you honor the person who's passed, is by living life. So, and we talked about like the Jewish tradition of Shiva a lot too, and just how beautiful it is, and how I don't know, just how purposeful it is.
Yeah, every step had a purpose. And I think the day or two after, my son's going to play in a mini Olympic game called the Maccabi Games coming up in 2 weeks in Atlanta, and they had a get the team together and go to the Dodgers.
Oh yeah.
And somebody must have come right up to me and been like, grilling me if I was a season ticket holder. Not only did they almost put me in tears, but it was like just right. You want to wear this sign that says, "Please, give me space."
Yeah, give me grace. It's like a veil, you know?
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. Yeah, that there's a little bit of like, I'm not quite ready.
Yeah.
And really gentle.
Yes. Yeah, men used to wear black bands around their arm to signify they were grieving. And I wish we still had something like that, because, again, everything's so personal, so quiet. People don't talk about mental health so openly, so you kind of feel isolated. You feel like you're the only one. But I feel like more and more, if we continue to open those doors, people are like, oh yeah, I get it, and I'm not alone, and we can honor each other's grief or trauma or depression, anxiety, whatever it is that you're dealing with. We can honor that if the conversations are being had. And I think Hazel especially was very good at that. And so and I think she and I liked that together. We both loved talking about our journeys together, and so I just want to keep that going,
Well, it's important, because a lot of people ask me this week and about, the variety of guests that I have and the rich life experiences, and even going into the uncomfortable subjects and some of the heavier subject matter that, like you said, people face, but do we shy away from talking it? Do we stay? And I certainly want it to be the mission of the show, not to avoid that which is real and has helped people to feel alive and purposeful.
Yeah.
And so, my point to listeners is, that performance is it's not an act. It's not about being less of who you are. Sometimes about stepping into the full authenticity of who you are. And that may mean, like you really illustrated, that you honor your grief, you honor your need for space, and then at the same point that resilience kind of kicks in, which says, but I still want to let my voice come forward.
Yes.
And yet by doing so, I'm kind of opening up the wounds. Yeah. So it's this has to be a kind of a cyclical process of I'm pushing myself to greater expansion and greater connection, but at the same time, the healing process continues.
Yeah, there's still days I can't get out of bed. And I used to feel very guilty about it. And now, through my therapy, and I do equine therapy, we were kind of talking about that before, I've just learned, like, you can be authentic even in that moment where you say, I can't get out of bed today. That's okay. I don't have to feel guilty about it. It's when it becomes a perpetual habit, and then it's a problem, then sure. But like yesterday I had a really tough evening, so I just stayed in my bed and played a video game, and it felt amazing because it gave me the ability to step outside of my grief and my trauma and like problem solve in a fun and exciting way. And it was like, okay, this is okay to do.
Yeah, and your brain does something fun or distracting, and you're like, my friends will make fun of me, but I'll like sneak a 1:30 in the afternoon, matinee movie once in a while. It's something it's got to be like the silliest one that gets like a 47 on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yes.
Because
I love going to the movies by myself. It's the best.
It's there's really no one can find you, nothing else can get in, and it's just about the pure like laughter.
Yes. I'm sure like some reality shows would do that for me too, but like the ultimate in people watching and garbage TV, I feel like probably would engage my brain enough to like be distracted by something so silly.
Yes, it's my family healing ritual to watch Survivor. I don't know.
Oh yeah. I used to watch Survivor, yeah. But yeah, I feel like, especially in equine therapy, you have to be, which is working with horses. You don't get to ride them, but you do emotional exercises with them. And
so tell us about so is it a trained therapist?
So you work with
the horses trained?
You work with a therapist who's familiar with the horses at the facility, and she kind of facilitates, or he facilitates what the day is going to look like. So sometimes she'll give me a challenge like, hey, I want you to work with this horse because this horse has this kind of personality, and I want to see if you can bring this part of you out and get them to listen to you, or get them to connect to you, or get them to walk around that barrel, or what does this kind of interaction represent in your life? Do you see this playing out in other relationships? So a lot of times it mirrors exactly what's going on in my life, and I'll be working with a horse and I'll be like trying to connect with it, and a trust issue will come up, and then I'll go, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I do in friendships or in my marriage or with my kids. And it's just this really incredible thing. But because they're such large animals, you have to be completely present and completely authentic with where you're at, because horses can feel your heartbeat from 5 feet away. So there's no fooling them where you are. And if they don't like your energy, they will tell you by like ignoring you or by, kicking or whatever. And if they like your energy, they will show you by connecting with you. So it's like, you have to be able to be in each feeling and each energy level. And it's been really good work for me, because my instinct is to run, from the pain, because it's so much. And my instinct is to like close myself off and say, I just don't want to deal with this anymore. I just want to say, this is not the life that I ordered, but it's forcing me to kind of go, yeah, okay, this is reality, and this is where I'm at, and that's okay to be where I'm at, because really crappy stuff happened, and maybe I can survive it, But some days it's hard to believe that, I'm not perfect. Certainly, if you listen to our podcast for Grits and Giggles, like you'll hear how much we go, oh my gosh, like this week was so hard, and I don't know how to get through this, or I don't know if I'm going to survive, but I'm still here, so I think that says something.
So you inspire other people who are living through it by being incredibly honest that you're still amidst your own process.
Yes, yeah, and just saying, I do not have it figured out, but these are the things that seem to be working for me. But I could very well end up inpatient at the hospital with a panic attack next week. Like, I'm still in the midst of all of that. But I do see healing happening, and so there is some sort of hope to hang on to, even though on some days I don't see it at all. I think that it's there, and I'm just trying really, really hard to find it.
Yeah, well, that's the key. It's in process.
Yes.
I mean, it's new. It'd be right. I mean, it's just a year. And the fact that you've done all these things for others, right? These little reminders, like, okay, you're still needing tending to. It's kind of like the 18-year-old you is still there going.
Yes, like you need to make space for yourself. And that's one of the biggest things I've worked on this last year, is folding in things that are me,
Where do you find them? What do you tell people who go through?
Yeah, I find, for me, I'm a very like outgoing, kind of connecting type of person. So a lot of times I find it in connecting with people. But on the flip side of that, when I have a break, I want complete solitude, because the rest of my life is always with children, with husband, with friends, with advocacy. And it's all, I get very fired up by connecting with people, but then sometimes I've really got to take that step back and have complete solitude. So I'll go see a movie by myself. I'll go out to dinner by myself, or read a book, sit in the hot tub. I started a writing class to workshop my book, which has been the best thing I ever did. And it brought that like creative side, that musical theater stuff that I've been missing for so long, back into my life again. And doing the podcast too, it's like that creative outlet. I find I'm a very creative geared person. So I think when it has to do with making something, you know, if I could sit in a kitchen and make dinner but not feel the pressure to have it on the table for 5 kids who won't like it, then I think I would really enjoy cooking.
Just throw flour on the floor. And
yes, but I can't, because it's like I've got all these different taste buds, and it's the end of the day. Like, that's the worst time to have a meal, like the biggest meal, be at the worst part of the day, because I'm drained and I'm tired, and they all want something different, and my husband's not home yet. But I think I really could enjoy cooking, because it's that same kind of process, you know? But yeah, that's where I kind of find it. And also nature, like nature's the biggest for me. I think sitting on the beach and just being quiet, or walking through the forest. Like I went to Alaska last month, and I just felt so at home, because it was green and weather and rivers and waterfalls, and it just felt so good, and I felt so close to Hazel.
I'm glad you said that. Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Did she like nature?
Yeah, she loved gardens, especially roses, but for some reason I feel the most connected with her when I'm out in nature. But when it's like dry and hot like it is, it's not as fulfilling for me, so I like to go away to experience green forests and you know, a river coming through the town, and yeah, it was really beautiful. But it's different for everybody. I know some people, like probably a lot of what you work with, are people who are sports, engaged in sports or physical activity. Like they get their joy and their adrenaline from physical activity. I'm not one of those people. I try to go to the gym, but I don't find joy in it. I like to take care of myself. We like to eat healthy. Pizza was kind of a exception to the rule. But I think there's always room for pizza no matter what.
There's always room for pizza.
But yeah, I think it's different for everyone, and I think it's worth it, and you owe it to yourself, especially if you're struggling, to just try different things that speak to you, because it can change your life. Like, it really can.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, especially for athletes, because athletes grieve too.
Yes.
Many of us in Los Angeles heard about the Tyler Skaggs situation, and the beautiful tribute last Friday night, for losing a player just 27 years old. And athletes grieve, and you can see it.
But they still have to keep playing.
Right, and you can see it, and you wonder like how they're handling it. You can see how close they're getting.
Yes.
And not in the way they probably would have ever chose, but in a way that's changed them forever.
Yes.
So athletes too may need to get away from, maybe it's in a way the season may be the best thing for them right now, because it keeps them focused on a purpose. But there may be a time when finding away from the place where you're required to perform.
Yes.
Maybe less. For me, it's been 3 weeks since lost my father, and I found myself on a beach yesterday in Oxnard that resembled like the East Coast beaches. It was cold and damp, and it was just took the shoes off and lay in the feet. Home, and there was a healing element to it, and it was amazing because talk about the horse's senses from 5 feet away. My whole family knew, because for the ones who were always pulling in different directions and demanding different things, everyone sat still.
Wow, and you could just pick up the sand and feel it.
Yeah, everyone sat there, no one worried about getting dirty or how much was going to get on their socks. And
that's beautiful.
So it's those moments which feel like the healing process is kind of alive and moving in a direction. But they're giving us the few-minute flag down here, and I want to give you a chance to please let everyone know about, first of all, to thank you for being here and sharing your deeper reservoir and Hazel's journey and her purpose and inspiration, which she continues to give us right now, and to share a little bit about what you have coming up and exciting news and things that you're going to be.
Yeah, well, the first thing is that gala fundraiser I was talking to you about. We host it every year. It's coming up August 24th. It's called the Ever After Ball, and it benefits the St. Baldrick's Foundation. You can go to stbaldricks.org/everafterball to make a donation or buy tickets. We'd love to have you. It's dinner, auctions, entertainment, drinking, dancing. Like, it's just a really fun
Hopefully we can
event.
post a link for that.
Yeah,
after the show,
yeah. And we're always looking for sponsors or donations, so we'd love it if you could join us. And then secondly, the other big project I've been working on is Janet, the producer here. She and I met, I think it was last year, when I came to babysit a friend's infant who was being interviewed on one of the segments from All Access Broadcasting. She started talking about her journey, and then she kind of shared a little bit about my story. And Janet immediately was like, "Can we have you on today?" And I said, "Sure." So they interviewed me, and then Janet and I just really connected. And she was like, "We got to have your own show." She's like, "You're really good at this. You have a lot to say." So we've been slowly and carefully working on it, and I can officially say I will be having my own segment here on All Access Broadcasting, and it's going to start on August 6th, but we're going to do a live kickoff on July 18th, and it's going to be called Hope with Lauren Kelley.
Wow.
So we talk about hope a lot today, and that's kind of the goal for my show is infusing hope.
My dad would have 49 years married at that time, so
wow.
So hopefully he'll be present on that day.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so I'm excited. I get to be a fellow contributor, and I just feel thankful for the opportunity. This is the kind of stuff that brings fulfillment to me, and also I feel like is the most honoring to my daughter's memory, and so I'm just really thrilled and honored that I get to be a part of it.
Amazing. Well, thank you for educating me about childhood cancer and the fact that children could be so resilient in fighting for the majority of their life.
Yeah.
It is sad, but also really amazing and inspiring that all her gifts went to joy and healing and cheering up others.
Yeah.
And
I feel like it was a privilege to be her mom.
Yeah. Now she's given launch to you, Advocacy on the Hill, and if there's anything we can do through the show to promote your show and the charities you're working on,
we'll stay connected.
Yeah.
And thank you for doing this show. Again, I think there's not a lot of people out there that are so open and vulnerable with this stuff, and the fact that you're here doing it is really great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So from the physical brutality of MMA fighting to the inner warrior, we hope to represent both here on the show. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you back in 2 weeks. Stay tuned, and we're out. Thank you, everyone.